Herds of heavyweight wild boars can turn entire agricultural lands into war zones in a single night. But while the world spends millions on extermination, a paradoxical technological shift awaits ahead. Humanity is dealing with an invulnerable biological machine. A mature male weighs over 200 kilograms, armored with a thick layer of dense cartilage. Their snouts operate as living plows, driven by reinforced neck muscles capable of lifting 80-kilogram obstacles with a single upward thrust. They tear through compacted topsoil. They unearth root systems and wipe out months of human labor before sunrise. Pure brute force, total devastation. Across continents, a silent collapse of traditional defense systems is underway. We pitted modern engineering against primitive muscle mass. The muscle won. High-voltage electric fences snap and short-circuit under the relentless momentum of a charging herd. Heavy steel traps buckle under jaws that generate hundreds of pounds of pressure per square inch. Even militarized responses utilizing professional extermination teams and helicopters fail to hold the perimeter. How did a primitive animal render advanced control technologies completely useless? The physical barriers fall. The reason for this pest's invulnerability lies not in biological armor, but in ruthless mathematics. Their reproductive system operates like a flawless conveyor belt. An adult female delivers 6 to 12 piglets per litter, 2 times a year. A single breeding pair multiplies into a colony of hundreds within just 36 months. Pure geometric progression. This explosive multiplication makes any passive defense completely useless. In the United States, the biological chain reaction has already pushed the population past 6 million individuals. Texas holds the critical mass. 2.6 million wild boars occupy the state. The sun sets over a quiet agricultural plot. The invasion begins. Herds weighing thousands of pounds breach the field boundaries. The heavy soil absorbs the dull crunch of severed root crops. Thick turf rips apart under the coordinated thrust of hundreds of rigid snouts in total darkness. A boar's snout functions exactly like a mechanical steel plow driven by massive neck muscles. They systematically excavate the ground to extract deep tubers and insects. By dawn, the silent night landscape transforms into raw morning chaos. Shattered stems, deep muddy trenches, eradicated harvests. European farmers from Spain to Germany battle the same overturned earth, but the American metrics reveal the true physical scale of this biological war. The relentless excavation shreds rural infrastructure across 35 states. The sheer financial damage equals the entire construction budget of a modern commercial skyscraper. Every single year, the agricultural industry sustains total losses reaching exactly $2.5 billion. To halt a $2.5 billion financial bleed, the agricultural sector underwent a radical shift. Farmers swapped tractors for thermal optics, transforming ordinary cornfields into active combat zones. Passive defense had already failed. Across Europe, thousands of kilometers of electrified wire stretch from Spain to Poland. The current delivers a sharp shock, but a charging boar simply ignores the pain, smashing through the barriers. Physical walls mean nothing against exponential reproduction. The United States chose a different doctrine. Engineering replaced waiting. Deep along the forest edges of Texas and Oklahoma, technicians assemble massive steel corral traps. The scale is architectural. A single enclosure measures 10 to 15 meters in diameter, matching the exact footprint of a suburban house. Inside the steel ring, fermented corn acts as the primary bait. Motion-triggered cameras monitor the perimeter, streaming live feeds to operators stationed kilometers away. The process requires absolute patience. The boars step into the kill zone one by one. Then, the numbers hit a critical mass. 20 to 30 individuals gather inside the perimeter. The operator taps a screen. An electromagnetic lock releases a heavy metal gate weighing over 800 pounds. Gravity takes over. The steel grid drops to the dirt in a fraction of a second. The trap secures the entire herd at once. But static traps cannot outpace the breeding cycle. When ground geometry fails, the operation goes airborne. Professional hunting teams move into the southern plains, bringing military-grade hardware into a biological war. The sensory shift is stark. Through the lens of advanced infrared equipment, the pitch-black forest turns into a cold green landscape. Against this monochromatic background, the bright red thermal signatures of wild boars glow like beacons. Hunters easily detect concealed herds hiding hundreds of meters away. High-velocity rifles eliminate dozens of targets in a single night. In zones with extreme population density, the hunt takes to the skies. Light tactical helicopters fly low over the Texas brush. The rotors roar. Downdrafts flatten the tall grass. Marksmen lean out of the open doors, tracking and shooting herds as they scatter across the plains. This aerial offensive alone removes tens of thousands of boars annually, cementing it as one of the largest wildlife control operations in North America. Humans deploy military aviation and advanced infrared optics against wild pigs. Yet the pigs still win. As the helicopters bank away, leaving thousands of carcasses in the dust, the mathematical reality remains unchanged. Deep in the neighboring forest, a newly born generation continues to breed without pause. Instead of funding endless eradication campaigns, farmers in the southern Chinese provinces executed a radical pivot. They converted an uncontrollable biological threat into a high-margin genetic resource. The timeline resets in 2018. African swine fever breaches commercial biosecurity perimeters. The viral wave sweeps the country, forcing the immediate culling of hundreds of millions of domestic pigs. Over $100 billion evaporate from the agricultural sector in months. Meat supply collapses. Standard industrial farming reaches a dead end. System failure. Livestock engineers respond with targeted genetic modification. They extract the resilient DNA of the mountain wild boar and crossbreed it with domestic swine lines. The hybridization mechanics rely on strict trait selection. Wild males inject immune durability and dense, dark muscle tissue into the bloodline. Domestic females guarantee high litter sizes and physiological stability. The output is a stabilized genetic hybrid, a biological upgrade. This engineered mutation transforms a former agricultural pest into a premium market commodity. On wholesale exchanges, hybrid meat commands a price 2 to 3 times higher than standard industrial pork. The financial deficit flips into a massive surplus. A radically new agricultural framework is now active. However, raising an engineered asset that retains the skeletal strength and kinetic drive of a forest predator renders traditional concrete pens obsolete, demanding an entirely new geometry of living space. To ensure the new hybrids retain the physiology of their wild ancestors, standard concrete hangars were completely useless. Engineers had to design cyclopean, semi-wild biomes. They locked entire mountains inside an artificial perimeter. The volume of steel infrastructure covering the landscape is massive. Each enclosure spans from 20 to 50 hectares. 50 hectares is a closed steel ecosystem comparable in area to 70 football fields. Inside this vast network, a single farm concentrates between 3,000 and 5,000 individuals. The contrast with industrial agriculture is absolute. A heavy steel fence cuts directly through the steep forest slope. Below the canopy, dark silhouettes of boars tear the damp soil with their tusks. Meanwhile, a standard domestic pig stands motionless inside a tight concrete rectangle. In the mountain facilities, dynamic survival replaces static confinement. The slopes in these southern regions often exceed a 30-degree incline. The dull sound of cracking roots and the dry rustle of leaf litter echo under the hooves of the massive herd. This complex terrain dictates the physics of muscle formation. Constant climbs on steep elevations force the animals to heavily engage their core and hind legs. This intense daily mechanical load builds dense, slow-twitch muscle fibers. The severe cardiovascular strain saturates the tissue with oxygen-binding myoglobin. The resulting meat becomes distinctly firm and lean. Continuous movement, zero stagnation, maximum kinetic load. The herds relentlessly run, compete, and dig across the hillsides. Every physical action fuels a non-stop mechanical transformation of their own bodies. But a vast territory is only a testing ground. The real catalyst for growth becomes artificially complicated logistics. Carbohydrates are not served in troughs, they must be extracted. Farm operators replace expensive synthetic feed with scattered agricultural byproducts. Instead of pouring grain into accessible pens, they drop compressed root and crop residues across hidden forest sectors. The herd must walk, dig, and forage for every calorie. Forced daily migration. Continuous physical exertion burns away the soft tissue. tissue. What emerges is a dense muscle frame weighing up to 150 kilograms, a biological structure as heavy as a standard utility motorcycle, completely stripped of excess fat. Broad shoulders and rigid tendons form a raw, biomechanical product built entirely by steep terrain and calculated hunger. This biological engine operates on a delayed schedule. The animals undergo an extended growth cycle lasting from 12 to 18 months to hit an ultimate body mass between 120 and 150 kilograms. A slow, methodical accumulation of tight muscle fibers, 18 months of waiting, $5 billion of annual revenue. By slashing basic feed costs and commanding premium prices for tough, highly trained meat, engineers turned a global agricultural disaster into a massively lucrative economic model. The profit margin is staggering, yet the biological risks remain hidden. But does this multi-billion-dollar industry actually solve the problem of an invasive species? Or is it right now forming a new, even more complex threat? Meat sourced from mountain farms arrives at the production halls, where at a baseline temperature of 12 to 16 degrees Celsius, the first stage of technological transformation begins: mechanical separation. Steel blades carve the heavy, dark red muscle fibers away from the bone. Conveyor belts divert the massive hind legs for whole curing, while the premium lean cuts head straight into high-capacity industrial grinders. Inside the cold processing chamber, rotating metal shears tear through the dense tissue. The physics of this destruction builds a completely new architecture. The machinery does not simply mince the flesh. It engineers a precisely calibrated structural matrix. Deep red, iron-rich protein fibers fold into chunks of pure white fat. The viscous, heavy texture of the crushed lipids physically binds the fragmented muscle together. Massive steel augers blend this thick paste with sea salt, black pepper, white wine, and sharp regional spices like crushed fennel or dry paprika. The industrial mixer churns the dense compound until every lipid cell uniformly coats the protein structures. The seasoned matrix then drops into the steel cylinder of a heavy hydraulic stuffing machine. Operators stretch natural, lightly salted casings over the extrusion nozzle. The machine engages. A massive hydraulic ram drives a mechanical force equal to the weight of a small vehicle directly against the thick paste. The system calibrates this extrusion pressure with ruthless precision. An excess of force will instantly rupture the delicate natural membrane. A slight drop in pressure will leave microscopic air pockets trapped inside the dense matrix, creating a perfect breeding ground for lethal bacterial rot. The balance remains flawless. Workers swiftly tie the ends of each filled segment with thick twine, sealing the cylinders tight. This single production line routinely pushes out hundreds of premium units every day, sustaining rigid artisanal exactness at a formidable industrial scale. The steel hydraulic nozzle continuously extrudes the dense meat matrix into the expanding natural casings, pushing the heavy batons directly toward the next processing stage. The pressure-formed batons move into specialized chambers, where mechanical processing gives way to biological transformation, strictly within those same 12 to 16 degrees Celsius. These staging rooms operate as one massive biological reactor, holding enough raw protein simultaneously to feed a small town. Climate control systems maintain strict environmental parameters: 70 to 80% relative humidity, 3 to 6 weeks of absolute precision. One microclimate failure destroys the entire batch. Beneath the casing, lactic acid bacteria begin their silent work. They consume structural sugars and aggressively drop the internal pH level, breaking down the dense meat matrix. This specific biochemical reaction darkens the muscle fibers and generates a sharp, complex aroma. Aging is not mere dehydration, it is controlled cellular breakdown. Once the desired maturity registers on the sensors, manual intervention briefly returns. Workers wipe away excess surface growth, label the units, and wrap them in specialized food-grade packaging. The product drops quickly into standard cardboard cartons, leaving the active biological zone for global logistics networks. Yet the long-term stability of the product relies entirely on the final stage of fermentation. A dense layer of white penicillium mold completely covers the outer casing. This living microscopic ecosystem forms a rigid biological barrier, physically locking essential moisture inside the baton. The dull, rhythmic thud of steel knives gives way to a quiet, highly controlled environment. While bacteria transform salami in chambers at 70 to 80% humidity, whole legs undergo a different physical treatment on the adjacent line: osmotic dehydration. Craftsmen swiftly strip away excess fat and skin. Just enough remains to guide the cure. A machine etches a unique identification code directly into the rind, a permanent passport. The legs move into massive, pitch-black cold rooms. Here, the industrial soundscape completely vanishes. Hundreds of raw legs lie motionless across expansive racks, buried under a thick layer of pure sea salt. The heavy crunch of coarse crystals echoing faintly under boots is the only sound. This is not mere seasoning, it is strict physics. The dense sodium chloride creates an extreme hypertonic environment across the surface. It acts as a chemical vacuum. The salt actively pulls moisture outward through the semi-permeable cellular membranes, dehydrating the tissue while drawing the curing agent deep into the muscle core. Water escapes. Flavor concentrates. The silent chemistry abruptly shatters under mechanical force. The once soft and yielding raw tissue meets the brutal steel of a continuous roller system. Giant metal cylinders aggressively compress the muscle fibers. The applied pressure matches the weight of a compact car bearing down on a single cut. This intense mechanical massage forces the residual salt deeper into the cellular matrix without tearing the natural fibers. The physical structure drastically changes. Soft meat becomes high-density armor. Then comes the deafening roar. Jets of icy water blast the product at immense pressure. The violent liquid torrent instantly strips away the external salt crust, leaving only the internally absorbed minerals behind. Specialized presses deliver one final structural correction, compacting the raw anatomy into tight aerodynamic proportions. The water valves slam shut. Dripping wet and deeply compressed, the icy legs hang completely motionless, waiting for the long descent into the dark cellars. After pressing, the hams with individual codes leave the cold rooms. Now, the main technological factor for the next 36 months becomes time. For the first 90 days, the meat hangs in climate-controlled chambers. The cool air stabilizes the outer skin. The inner muscle tissue begins to concentrate. No mechanical intervention, just biology. Then, the timeline shifts drastically. The legs are transferred into deep curing cellars where they hang undisturbed for 24 to 36 months. In this near-total darkness, natural tissue enzymes act as microscopic scissors. They systematically break down complex protein chains into free amino acids, occasionally forming tiny white tyrosine crystals, a clear biological marker of prolonged aging. This gradual chemical breakdown builds a dense flavor matrix that high-speed industrial machinery simply cannot synthesize. But this molecular alchemy demands a heavy physical toll. Over 3 years, continuous evaporation literally shrinks the tissue. A raw leg weighing 15 kilograms will surrender 6 kilograms of water into the atmosphere, a mass loss equivalent to an average bowling ball vanishing into thin air. The final distribution moves fast. Workers manually debone the cured muscle, trim it into smooth blocks, and feed it into automated slicers that pack paper-thin cuts into vacuum cartons. Yet this rapid global logistics chain only activates after the cellar atmosphere extracts its price, slowly evaporating between 30 and 40%. Losing 40% of the weight during the maturation process is the physical price that finally transforms a former agricultural threat into a premium economic asset. For centuries, the wild boar meant only one thing to rural communities: complete agricultural ruin. A migrating herd could decimate a season of corn overnight, leaving behind a scarred landscape of rooted earth and trampled stalks. Pure devastation. Today, that historical narrative is entirely rewritten. The sharp transition from destroyed agricultural fields to illuminated glass vitrines in high-end culinary boutiques represents a masterclass in human adaptation to nature. Instead of governments draining millions of dollars into endless eradication programs, regional economies have integrated the animal into a highly profitable value chain. The ecological problem essentially funds its own management. An uncontrollable surge of wild biomass is systematically converted into a globally traded commodity, yet ecosystems remain fiercely unpredictable. When a wild pest becomes a necessary asset for a lucrative industry, the boundary between controlling a biological threat and sustaining a commercial resource begins to blur. Is this elegant gastronomic model the ultimate solution to a pervasive ecological crisis? Or is it merely the beginning of a new, infinitely more complex cycle?